Laika, Russian, Loiko c. 1954 to 3 November 1957, was a Soviet space dog who became one of the first animals in space, and the first animal to orbit the Earth. Laika, a stray mongrel from the streets of Moscow, was selected to be the occupant of the Soviet spacecraft Sputnik 2 that was launched into low orbit on 3 November 1957. No capacity for her recovery and survival was planned, and she died of overheating or asphyxiation shortly before she was to be poisoned. Little was known about the impact of spaceflight on living creatures at the time of Laika's mission, and the technology to deorbit had not yet been developed, so Laika's survival was never expected. Some scientists believed humans would be unable to survive the launch or the conditions of outer space. So engineers viewed flights by animals as a necessary precursor to human missions. 1. The experiment aimed to prove that a living passenger could survive being launched into orbit and endure a micro-G environment, paving the way for human spaceflight and providing scientists with some of the first data on how living organisms react to spaceflight environments. Laika died within hours from overheating, possibly caused by a failure of the central R7 sustainer to separate from the payload. The true cause and time of her death were not made public until 2002. Instead, it was widely reported that she died when her oxygen ran out on day 6 or, as the Soviet government initially claimed, she was euthanized prior to oxygen depletion. On the 11th of April 2008, Russian officials unveiled a monument to Laika. A small monument in her honor was built near the military research facility in Moscow that prepared Laika's flight to space. It portrayed a dog standing on top of a rocket. She also appears on the monument to the conquerors of space in Moscow. Sputnik 2 main article. Sputnik 2. After the success of Sputnik 1 in October 1957, Nikita Khrushchev, the Soviet leader, wanted a spacecraft launched on 7 November 1957. The 40th anniversary of the October Revolution. Construction had already started on a more sophisticated satellite, but it would not be ready until December. This satellite would later become Sputnik 3. 2. Meeting the November deadline meant building a new craft. Khrushchev specifically wanted his engineers to deliver a Space Spectacular, a mission that would repeat the triumph of Sputnik 1, stunning the world with Soviet prowess. Planners settled on an orbital flight with a dog. Soviet rocket engineers had long intended a canine orbit before attempting human spaceflight. Since 1951, they had lofted 12 dogs into suborbital space on ballistic flights. Working gradually toward an orbital mission set for some time in 1958. To satisfy Khrushchev's demands, they expedited the orbital canine flight for the November launch. According to Russian sources, the official decision to launch Sputnik 2 was made on 10 or 12 October, leaving less than 4 weeks to design and build the spacecraft. 4. Sputnik 2, therefore, was something of a rush job, with most elements of the spacecraft being constructed from rough sketches. Aside from the primary mission of sending a living passenger into space, Sputnik 2 also contained instrumentation for measuring solar irradiance and cosmic rays. 2. The craft was equipped with a life support system consisting of an oxygen generator and devices to avoid oxygen poisoning and to absorb carbon dioxide. A fan, designed to activate whenever the cabin temperature exceeded 15 degrees Celsius (59 degrees Fahrenheit), was added to keep the dog cool. Enough food, in a gelatinous form, was provided for a 7-day flight. And the dog was fitted with a bag to collect waste. A harness was designed to be fitted to the dog, and there were chains to restrict her movements to standing, sitting, or lying down. There was no room to turn around in the cabin. An electrocardiogram monitored heart rate and further instrumentation tracked respiration rate, maximum arterial pressure, and the dog's movements. Training Laika was found as a stray wandering the streets of Moscow. Soviet scientists chose to use Moscow strays since they assumed that such animals had already learned to endure conditions of extreme cold and hunger. 3. This specimen was a 5 kilograms, 11 pounds, 7, mongrel. Female. Approximately 3 years old. Another account reported that she weighed about 6 kilograms, 13 pounds, 3. Soviet personnel gave her several names and nicknames, among them Kudryavka, Russian for little curly, Zhuchka, little bug, and Limonchik, little lemon. Laika, the Russian name for several breeds of dogs similar to the husky, was the name popularized around the world. Its literal translation would be barker, from the Russian verb layat, lat, to bark. According to some accounts, the technicians actually renamed her from Kudryavka to Laika due to her loud barking. 8. The American press dubbed her Mutnik, mut suffix nik, as a pun on Sputnik. 9. Or referred to her as Curly. 10. Her true pedigree is unknown, although it is generally accepted that she was part husky or other Nordic breed, and possibly part terrier. 3. NASA refers to Laika as a part Samoyed terrier. 11. A Russian magazine described her temperament as phlegmatic, saying that she did not quarrel with other dogs. The Soviet Union and United States had previously sent animals only on suborbital flights. 12. 3 dogs were trained for the Sputnik 2 flight: Albina, Mushka, and Laika. 13. Soviet spacelife scientists Vladimir Yazdovsky and Oleg Gazenko trained the dogs. 14. To adapt the dogs to the confines of the tiny cabin of Sputnik 2. They were kept in progressively smaller cages for periods of up to 20 days. The extensive close confinement caused them to stop urinating or defecating, made them restless, and caused their general condition to deteriorate. Laxatives did not improve their condition, and the researchers found that only long periods of training proved effective. The dogs were placed in centrifuges that simulated the acceleration of a rocket launch and were placed in machines that simulated the noises of the spacecraft. This caused their pulses to double and their blood pressure to increase by 30 to 65 torr. The dogs were trained to eat a special high-nutrition gel that would be their food in space. 6. Before the launch, one of the mission scientists took Laika home to play with his children. In a book chronicling the story of Soviet space medicine, Dr. Vladimir Yazdovsky wrote, "Laika was quiet and charming. I wanted to do something nice for her. She had so little time left to live." Pre-flight preparations. Vladimir Yazdovsky made the final selection of dogs and their designated roles. Laika was to be the flight dog, a sacrifice to science on a one-way mission to space. 16. Albina, who had already flown twice on a high-altitude test rocket, was to act as Laika's backup. The third dog, Mushka, was a control dog. She was to stay on the ground and be used to test instrumentation and life support. 12. Before leaving for the Baikonur Cosmodrome, Yazdovsky and Gazenko conducted surgery on the dogs, routing the cables from the transmitters to the sensors that would measure breathing, pulse, and blood pressure. 17. Because the existing airstrip at Turatam near the Cosmodrome was small, the dogs and crew had to be first flown aboard a Tu-104 plane to Tashkent. From there, a smaller and lighter Il-14 plane took them to Turatam. Training of dogs continued upon arrival. One after another they were placed in the capsules to get familiar with the feeding system. 16. According to a NASA document, Laika was placed in the capsule of the satellite on 31 October 1957, 3 days before the start of the mission. 6. At that time of year, the temperatures at the launch site were extremely cold, and a hose connected to a heater was used to keep her container warm. 2 assistants were assigned to keep a constant watch on Laika before launch. Just prior to liftoff on 3 November 1957. From Baikonur Cosmodrome, Laika's fur was sponged in a weak alcohol solution and carefully groomed, while iodine was painted onto the areas where sensors would be placed to monitor her bodily functions. 18. One of the technicians preparing the capsule before final liftoff stated that, after placing Laika in the container and before closing the hatch, "We kissed her nose and wished her bon voyage, knowing that she would not survive the flight." Voyage. The exact time of the launch varies from source to source and is mentioned as 5 hours 30 minutes and 42 seconds Moscow time or 7:22 Moscow time. 16. At peak acceleration, Laika's respiration increased to between 3 and 4 times the pre-launch rate. 6. The sensors showed her heart rate was 103 beats. Ethics of animal testing. NASA named this soil target on Mars after Laika during the Mars Exploration Rover mission. Due to the overshadowing issue of the Soviet versus US space race, the ethical issues raised by this experiment went largely unaddressed for some time. As newspaper clippings from 1957 show, the press was initially focused on reporting the political perspective, while the health and retrieval, or lack thereof, of Laika only became an issue later. 22. Sputnik 2 was not designed to be retrievable, and it had always been accepted that Laika would die. 4. The mission sparked a debate across the globe on the mistreatment of animals and animal testing in general to advance science. 14. In the United Kingdom, the National Canine Defence League called on all dog owners to observe a minute's silence, while the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, RSPCA, received protests even before Radio Moscow had finished announcing the launch. Animal rights groups at the time called on members of the public to protest at Soviet embassies. 23. Others demonstrated outside the United Nations in New York. 14. Laboratory researchers in the U.S. offered some support for the Soviets, at least before the news of Laika's death. In the Soviet Union, there was less controversy. Neither the media, books in the following years, nor the public openly questioned the decision to send a dog into space. In 1998, after the collapse of the Soviet regime, Oleg Gazenko, one of the scientists responsible for sending Laika into space, expressed regret for allowing her to die. Work with animals is a source of suffering to all of us. We treat them like babies who cannot speak. The more time passes, the more I'm sorry about it. We shouldn't have done it. We did not learn enough from this mission to justify the death of the dog. 21, 22. In other Warsaw Pact countries, open criticism of the Soviet space program was difficult because of political censorship, but there were notable cases of criticism in Polish scientific circles. A Polish scientific periodical, KTO, Kiedy Dlatego, who, when, Why, published in 1958, discussed the mission of Sputnik 2. in the periodicals section dedicated to astronautics. Christoph Bohren described the Sputnik 2 mission as regrettable, and criticized not bringing Laika back to Earth alive as undoubtedly a great loss for science. 25. Legacy. Laika is memorialized in the form of a statue and plaque at Star City, Russia, the Russian cosmonaut training facility. 26, created in 1997. Laika is positioned behind the cosmonauts with her ears erect. 26. The monument to the conquerors of space, constructed in 1964. Also includes Laika. 27, on the 11th of April 2008, 28, at the military research facility where staff had been responsible for readying Laika for the flight. Officials unveiled a monument of her poised on top of a space rocket. 1. Stamps and envelopes picturing Laika were produced, as well as branded cigarettes and matches.